Organizers of the third World Conference on Artificial Intelligence. It's my honor and pleasure to discuss the most complex topic, which is consciousness and mind. At Tsinghua University, we like to develop physical systems that would enable us to model, also provide tools to understand deeply what is mind and what is conscious. These are very complex subjects, require interdisciplinary approach. We approach from the perspective of materials, sensors, and systems. Since it is a highly interdisciplinary subject, we need to understand the descriptions of consciousness and mind from the point of philosophers, non-philosophers, scientists, neuroscientists, biologists, and medical doctors. So allow me to let's start with current situation in the world. Billions of dollars are now invested, and most governments are talking about rapid development of AI and future economic growth. We have seen people talking about super intelligence, agentic artificial intelligence, robots developing towards humanoids has an ability function. And also social scientists talk about AI is making human beings subcognitive. There's also research that's happening which is talking about developing large language models, algorithms towards artificial consciousness. Of course, people around the world think about even more exploratory aspects about afterlife, combining bigger concepts of humanity. And our modern life is constantly subjected to a variety of sounds. That is actually impact quality of mind. So recently, in addition to emotional quotient, intelligent quotient, we're also talking about mental health quotient. There's enough evidence around the world, mental health quotient, young people, is getting affected due to these stresses of modern life. And these are the data. And an average should be about 65 to 66, global average. In many countries, mental health quotient is lower than the global average. So it is a concern for the governments as well as the families. So that brings us to two keywords: mind and conscious. And what is mind? What is consciousness? It's not well understood by most people, including scientists. So let me explain. Mind is generally understood as a non-physical aspect of human beings. Mind is a composite of all mental functions. So if you imagine mental function to be more than 100 types, a composite of them, we can say collectively the mind. The mind requires a physical basis, and we call that as brain and neurons and synapses. Those grounded in history, those from the social science aspect, they tend to believe mind can exist on its own without the basis of a physical form. But as scientists, we believe for mind to exist, there must be physicality, and that is your brain and neuronal processing. Then that brings us to the next thing, is the intelligence. So intelligence is an emergent function or ability of certain knowing. So if you now imagine how AI are embedded with information collected from the human brain, we are trying to simulate intelligence aspects of the human being. So, important learning point for anyone to be intelligent. If you want to advise your children to be intelligent, you need to understand they must have lots of memory, they must have lots of experience. The iterative process of learning from the memory is what forms the basis for intelligence. So this is our understanding. So that brings us to the next topic, what we call metacognition. What it means is, it is your cognitive ability that you are aware, that you are thinking, you are feeling, and how to process the information in your brain. That is a metacognition. So metacognition is the ability we teach in the schools so that young children develop the ability to self-observe their thinking and correct their behavior, which is considered more acceptable, responsible. So in the future, when we develop artificial mind, artificial consciousness, we are basically providing excellent tools for the metacognition ability of human beings. So that brings us to the question, what is consciousness? So human quest to understand mind and consciousness been there for thousands of years, literally 10,000 years. Spiritual concepts consider consciousness as the whole of all, and it is a state of being, spiritual reality that transcends the physical and mental self. So that's the definition of consciousness from the point of philosophers and sociologists. But when it comes to scientific community, and people like me, we look at intellectual or technical definition of consciousness is the capacity for subjective awareness of internal processes, for example, thoughts and feelings, and external stimuli, world around us. That's basically what we call consciousness from the point of science. So if you want to appreciate this one, a simple thought experiment. You are able to see me. Why? Is that because light here? Is that because you have eyes? Light facilitates it. Eyes is your internal innate ability to see things. So as a scientist, we consider consciousness is your innate ability to see things. The physical basis for consciousness, we believe, is your approach. It's quite different from consciousness is there, and consciousness is what directing all the processes in the universe. That's an outlook. So we need to think through very deeply. So we look at all the scientific research that is published in this area. For example, a top journal, Nature, 1872, more than 200 years ago, they have been trying to define what is consciousness. You can see that information. There are physiological factors for consciousness. This is published in Nature in 1930, more than 100 years ago. Then there is also 1922. So, famous philosophers, psychologists like Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung, many others, they use the word mind, subconscious, preconscious, unconscious, and self. So this is a debate that's been going on for quite some time among the scientific community. So, same as what I said about the based on our ability to see. That was also reported in 1925. And here is a famous scientist, a grandson, how he explains consciousness. So, I would like to summarize that part. There are two opposite views on consciousness. What is consciousness? So, consciousness is certainly on the list of most intractable questions. That's because it means different things for different people. That's why we need a conferences like this, serious, in-depth discussions are needed to understand what exactly are we talking about. Without that exchange of deep alternative views, we will never be able to progress on artificial consciousness. So this is the left side of the model. Now let me go deeper. So if you now start looking at all the definitions that I put forward by different disciplinary people, you actually see the whole range. So it cannot be taken very lightly. That's why you need a conference like this, where people with a different background, different concepts, would share their thoughts, and finally we get a better understanding. So let me put that into categories, and you can call them fundamental, quantum, atomic, idealism, and external mind, and entire cosmos. So that's basically the different definitions. And here we bring in a free will, an artificial consciousness, number one, which is basically materialism, which is basically what we are talking about, physical system. So when we devise physical systems and models, most likely we will begin to accept artificial concept consciousness as a material basis. Otherwise, you will be more moving towards number 7, 9, 10, and 12. So these are different concepts. They would never would agree that physical basis artificial consciousness is same as the consciousness they talk about. So, welcome to the most challenging understanding of what we call consciousness. Okay, so from the 1990s, last 35 years, deeper scientific approach is being taken about what is consciousness, what is mind. So let's take an example. In our brain, we have more than 100 billion neurons forming trillions of junctions, what we call them synapses. And these processes are basically developing your abilities, what we call mental, that includes emotions, cognition, and so on. So with advanced tools like functional MRI and many other technologies I will show you, we are beginning to understand molecular processes involved in our brain as we function. For example, thalamus is actually the center of your brain. Decides which kind of thoughts you should feel more than other thoughts. So in other words, as you are listening to me, the thalamus in your brain actually tells you, processes, say, listen to this kind of idea, stop listening to those ideas. It works as a filter. So now imagine modern science is giving you the evidence how your brain functions, actually think. So we go from there, how do we now build artificial intelligence or artificial consciousness? So AI, I would not talk about it because there's lots of comprehensive, lots of information. What is AI? So I want to define what is artificial consciousness and how we are going about at Tsinghua University Intelligent Wearable Center. So here are the concepts. So we consider brain is just not a processor. Brain is a sensor. It's a fundamental hypothesis where we regard human brain not only a processor, it is a sensor. So you have 5 senses. Plus brain is another sensor, you have a total of 6 senses or senses. If we can collect the information from all the 6 senses and create a virtual models, that will give you artificial. And if we can build them deeper, stronger, much more comprehensive, we will get towards artificial mind. So that's basically our idea is to build the physical tools and devices and a system that will enable us closer to deeply understand artificial mind and artificial consciousness. So, here is enabling science and technology. For example, MIT professors, they are developing algorithms to understand, simulate our consciousness. Similarly, there are is the neural similarities between people, and then helps you to understand who you like more, who you like to have friends, who you not want them as your friends. So here you are basically kind of neuronal similarity, which you determine who you like, not like. And similarly, now we have the sensors and probes should be placed deep inside your brain, stimulate a particular behavior issue, what we call deep brain stimulation. And on top of that, we have a layer of computing, what we call affective computing. So this is how take the information which has a different mental functions and you build computational programs, what we call affective computing. Okay. Okay, so if you're wondering how this technology will progress, right now there are about 6 or 7 core technologies that are used in hospitals or medical care facilities to understand the mental brain processes near the surface, deep inside the brain, at a different spatial and time resolution. But these are not perfect, require much more advances. This is where we believe we can advance the front. And you can see the fMRI, echocardiography, local field potentials, EEG, time step size, and the spatial resolution. They still at the micrometer scale. We had to go down levels of single. These are the details how we compare them, and I will go down. So once you have this understanding, we can now develop non-invasive methods to help the people feel better. So non-invasive methods also includes wearables. We want to design them so that we can help the people dealing with their mental issues, for example, anxiety, tension, mental stress, inability to sleep. So those are the things we can generate as a benefits as we understand much more deeply about the human brain, mind, and consciousness. Okay? So this is how we think the future intelligent wearables develop. So on the left side, you already have those devices. Like the wearables, comes with watches, wristbands, tells you blood pressure, oxygen levels, and so on. That's at the beginning. So this technology is now progressing very rapidly. The coming 10-20 years, I believe, the huge economic opportunity for China as well as other countries. And that will certainly give more self-knowledge to the human beings. So this is how you can now look at different wearable technologies. And hopefully, eventually, we will get to what we call mind-to-mind communication. Extremely difficult, but it's something possible once we deeply understand mind. And we have the tools to understand and also come up with a hierarchical mind. Then you could also think of a mind-to-mind patient. So when such thing happens, you can imagine the size of economic activity, the impact on the humanity. So right now with the wearables, we can measure glucose levels, temperature, and the body motion and so on. We already can do that. For example, here, the patient, the hospital, baby, they could have a set of clinical conditions, but they do not have to communicate. The wearables will sense the information and communicate to the nurses, or medical doctors, or family members. These are already been available, and many others. And we can also make the surfaces much more responsive to that. Okay. We can put these variables self-energy generating so that your eye movement can generate sufficient energy for them to function, the wearable device. So then we also embed intelligence into the materials. And this is my student's company, AI company. Here. So at Chinese Academy of Sciences Shenzhen, we have a collaborative project. We embed intelligence into materials and we design future materials. And these are the materials and the details. Some of the examples. So our idea is to integrate as much sensory information from all the 6 senses, combined with the most advanced large language models as well as AI, big data, and create artificial consciousness and that requires fiber-based senses that requires self-generating energy systems that also looks at actuator so that it creates an external functionality based on that information. And then we're looking at most advanced efficient computing processes and then integrate them into the fibers and variables and externals. And then hopefully we get close to artificial consciousness. And then in our human body. And as other speakers said, it's this kind of knowledge. We are fundamentally advancing human knowledge to understand 3 important hard problems, hard questions. The emergence of life is solved previous. We show beautiful videos about the life and beginning. The second one, how do we embed intelligence into the systems? The last one is the mind-to-mind communication. So I think they're the most challenging scientific questions, and I guess in the coming years we will make significant progress through interdisciplinary approach. Okay, that's basically how we will imagine development process. Okay, I will conclude my talk. We are now working with one of the large companies in China. Anta, you all know that company, very big company. And that's a summary. So all I want to say is this technology, as they progress, it requires careful regulation and also guiding the whole process so that these advances serve humanity by their progress. And this is a very big conference at Lenin University in Beijing. So many judges and other people involved in lawmaking, they were there and we were discussing this. So in my summary, given its transformative implications, artificial consciousness requires real discourse. With that, I'd like to thank you for listening to me. Opportunity for me to share some of these thoughts with you. Thank you.